Have you ever been sitting in a theater, ready for a fun night out, and suddenly your body tells you a truth that your mind has been trying to outrun? That's what happened to my guest Ellen when she found herself sobbing through the musical Beetlejuice, in the dark, next to her family, with no idea why the tears would not stop. In our chat, Ellen shares how that night cracked open years of quiet burnout, people-pleasing, and trying to fit into systems that were never built for her, and how it led her to walk away from a very shiny job title to build work that actually feels like hers.
I just started crying and I could not stop. And it was so bizarre because I was like, what is happening? It was like I was possessed because the musical, again, not a sad musical. Like there was no reason for me to be crying.
You're listening to the Life Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gilhooly. This show is built around one simple idea, that sometimes a single moment can change how we see everything. Each week, I talk with someone about the moment that shifted their life and how they learned to live differently after it. These are not stories about having it all figured out. They are stories about what it looks like to keep going once the story changes. Thank you for being here. Here's today's story. Hey everyone, welcome to the Life Shift Podcast. I am here with Ellen. Hello, Ellen.
Hi, Matt. It's great to be here.
Well, it is great to see you again because I had the pleasure of talking to you on your podcast. So thank you for having me whenever that was. It seems like it was yesterday, but it was also probably months ago.
Yeah, maybe weeks. I don't know. But it was awesome to have you and get to know you. And your podcast is so cool. And it's really an honor to be here.
Well, I accept that. Thank you for saying that. The Life Shift is really... I don't know how to say it any differently. So someone that listens to every episode hears me say this very similarly every time, but it has been just a journey that I never could have imagined for myself. It's just like every conversation I get to have with now over 230 something people, a little bit of that conversation, crazy, a little bit of the conversation heals some part of me that I just didn't even know that needed the healing anymore. And I think it's that power of connection and something that growing up, I really didn't have the opportunity because of the time period to really feel. And just a little backstory for anyone listening for the first time, because you're on, the idea of the Life Shift Podcast exists because when I was 8, I was visiting my father. My parents were divorced. I lived with my mom full time, and I was visiting my dad. And one day he brought me into his office and he had to tell me that my mom had been killed in a motorcycle accident. And that was my life shift moment. It was a moment in time when the words came out of his mouth in which legit from 1 second to the next, everything that I knew about my life no longer existed. I was going to have to live with a different parent in a different state, go to different school, not see my friends anymore, create new friends. Like everything had changed. And it was 1989. It was 1989 and nobody was talking about grief and nobody was talking about anything like that. It was all, you keep that at home or you brush it under the rug. And I was also a kid. So everyone assumed that I was just going to bounce back and be fine. So I took on the role because everyone kind of made that seem like it was my role, and I pushed it down. And I say all that long-winded way of describing that because growing up, this long grief journey, I always wondered, do other people have these singular moments in time in which from 1 second to the next, everything has changed? Now in my wise 44 years, I realize we have lots of them, but there are some that really stick out for people. And so that's what we do on the Life Shift Podcast is I talk to guests about these pivotal moments in which 1 second to the next, everything was different. And how did that change us? And how can we reflect on it and see the resilience in the human spirit? So super into talking about what you're going to talk about today, because there's so much power in story. And hopefully you find that as you tell your story. You said you've talked about this story, but maybe not pieced it together in the way that we're going to do it today.
Yeah, it's really kind of the first time I'm piecing it together all from the beginning. I talk about it in the podcast, actually. My podcast is where I sort of first said words out loud to tell the story. And I'm still learning it, I think, as I go, and I'll explain what that means later. But yeah, it's not done. The impacts are still happening, right? So it's like this ever-changing story, but it's Yeah.
We're just so lucky, though, I think, if we have the awareness and the ability. I understand that a lot of people just don't have that yet, and they don't have the tools. But when we do, to understand our story even more and see how it can change us even more, I think that's beautiful that your story is still unfolding and changing as it happens. So
yeah, no, we're really lucky for that. It's like a filter was taken off, like everything was a little cloudy, and then I had the moment and sort of everything that came after it. And now I'm discovering things in a way I never would have before. I'm reading books that I've read before, but seeing them in a totally different light, understanding them differently. Like, it's just there are those moments for us all. And I think you're right. If you can stop and pay attention, if you're able to, which a lot of times we aren't, and we can talk about why, it's such a gift. It's such a gift. So I'm just grateful I was able to listen, maybe because the world was shouting at me, but like I was finally able to listen,
Yeah. Yeah. Did you find power the first time you said it out loud?
Yeah.
Because are things messier in your head than they are when you say them out loud? For me, it's like a hot mess inside.
Totally.
Okay.
And like that just makes me think of a very specific moment in my life, which is not the one I will talk about today, but definitely is a precursor to it. I remember sitting on my porch, talking to my best friend on the phone who lives in a different state, unfortunately. And I said the words out loud about the job I had been doing for 15 years. I don't want to do this anymore. And it was like the first time I had ever said it. And I don't even think I realized it until I said it. And because like, you're not supposed to not want to do the thing you've been doing for 15 years and you built your whole career around it. It just never felt like that was an option, I guess. And that was such a transformational moment because it started me on the path of questioning, which
that gives you the freedom or permission.
Yeah. But I like you were saying, I wouldn't have worked that out if I hadn't said it out loud, I think. And that's why I try to journal a lot. I'm not a great journaler, but sometimes, and I find this with my clients too, and I found it for myself, to actually write words down or say them out loud to someone, but sometimes you don't want to say them to anyone but yourself. It makes a huge difference. Like you can clarify things easier when you do a little bit of that like writing, and sometimes it's just gobbledygook, and that's okay, but it often will get you to this place of like, oh, this is what's happening for me. So there's a lot of power in that.
Of getting it out of your head. Getting
it out of your head, yeah. And like, even if you're not a great journaler, it's still worth trying to do, every once in a while. You don't have to be perfect at it, but like, every few days I'll write something down, and then it does really spark a lot.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way with journaling. I'm very type A. And so I felt like, how do I do it right? And like,
right, exactly.
And then do I modify what I'm saying just so it sounds right or it looks right? And then, so that's why I created the Life Shift Journal, because I was like, I need to create something that like I would actually do, and I will do, and I do. So I'm the same way. And I think people are just afraid of it because we're conditioned that there's like a right and wrong way to everything. Just like you were conditioned to think like you did something for 15 years, you have to stick with it. Like, that's not a rule. So before we get deeper into your story, let's have you tell us who you are at the moment of recording, kind of going into 2026. How do you show up in the world? How do you identify these days?
Well, I am a coach, an executive coach, leadership coach. I am a consultant, a speaker, a writer, and have really been developing that over the last 11 months. I started on this journey of being out on my own in January of 2025. So we're about to hit, a full year of doing this being solopreneuring, I guess we can call it, and not working in a workplace that was really challenging for me for years. And so I think I would say I'm becoming. I think that's what you were saying. You have a sticker that says something similar, but like I'm becoming, I'm emerging. I think maybe I'm out of the cocoon, but I'm not fully butterflied. And I just turned 46. So like there's this thing that happens in midlife. And there was a great Brene Brown video I saw on it last night, in the middle of the night when I was scrolling Instagram, like you're not supposed to do. But there is just something that breaks in midlife, I think. And that's why the majority of people I work with are midlife women, mid-career women, because there's something that happens to us. And I'm sure men too. But there's this moment where we sort of realize, or at least this was true for me, like we gave it all to other people, and a lot of the decisions that we made for our careers, for our life, whatever, were for other people first, whether it's our kids, our spouses or partners, our family, the workplace. And there's a lot that goes into making us feel like that's how we have to be. There's this perfectionism and this people pleasing that a lot of us are conditioned, especially who are in our middle ages right now. So this year has been this incredible year of exploration of like, what is breaking out of me and sort of like pooling on the floor from the before time. Sorry if that's super gross. And, of all of that, what is worth saving and what is worth throwing away? And there is a lot that's worth throwing away. But it's been like one of the best years of my life. I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. I'm so fulfilled. The work I'm doing is so amazing. And it's hard. It's also, we've had a hard year politically. Not having great benefits is scary. Like trying to do this on your own. There's a reason why the majority of people don't go off and start businesses. It's really hard. So I'm learning, unlearning, and relearning, and just kind of living in that space. So that's kind of how I'm showing up now. And I hope in 2026, which is right next door, I'm hoping that it's more of that, but also that my feet maybe hit some solid ground a little bit more and I can be more confident in the way I'm going,
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. And it's like, part of me is like, I wonder if you think, man, I wish I could have done this in my 20s or in my 30s. But at the same time, it would mean something totally different, right? Like you wouldn't have had all the experiences that make this, well, I'm just making a grand sweeping assumption, but you wouldn't have all these experiences that make this that fulfilling now.
100%.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny because I think about, when I was in college, my undergraduate degree, I was an acting major, a theater major. We had these classes called Meisner, the Meisner technique. If anyone listening is a recovering actor, you will cringe hearing that. But it was basically this technique where you had to really feel whatever it is you were acting. And so like you go into your deep, dark history and like try to remember a time when something bad happened to you so you can cry or whatever. I'm definitely making it simpler than it is, but it's about like pulling on your own grief or lived experience to authentically act. Not sure it's the greatest method now that I look back on it, but I had such a hard time because I didn't really have anything bad happen. And I say that knowing how much privilege I had. And certainly I had, shitty days at school, and I, had bullying and all sorts of things like all kids have. But I had great parents who loved me a lot and really didn't stand in my way ever and let me do what I wanted to do in terms of like fulfilling my dreams. And, I was 21, maybe 20. Like I just had a pretty good life. And so I could never find that space. And I joke that if I had go back to acting now, I would be amazing because I've lived all this other shit, since then. So that was a long answer, I guess. But no, I couldn't have done this in my 20s and 30s. I had to do this in my 40s. And I think that's what happens to a lot of us. It's like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's perimenopause and it's hormones. I don't know if it's maybe just what's going on in the world right now, but it does seem to be a big turning point for us to say, you know what? Maybe I can do stuff a little differently and it doesn't have to be like this,
Yeah. I think I saw a lot of people through the pandemic that kind of were able to take a little bit more time, unfortunately for so many, but also fortunately for some, to realize like what was serving them what they wanted to do.
Yep.
And so I think that also is probably a trigger for some that are now realizing that maybe there's a different way of doing and being. And so I think it's beautiful that you found that. And although you said your answer was a little bit long, it wasn't, because you kind of started painting the picture of who you were and how you kind of started to grow up and coming from a seemingly beautiful upbringing in some way, like no major thing. Like for me, I became a perfectionist because of my trauma.
Yeah.
But curious,
Yeah.
like it sounds like you had a pretty quote unquote normal existence as a child and teenager.
I did, and therapy's uncovered a lot of what I thought was normal that maybe wasn't the best way to treat myself, really, in a lot of ways. Like there's, like you were saying to me when we were talking earlier about like imagining that you're talking to the 8-year-old version of yourself. And I love that it's IFS, right? I think it's called Integrated Family Systems or something like that, where you're basically naming the different parts of your sort of psyche and you're talking to them, you're having conversations with them. And there's a great book by one of my favorite authors, Britt Frank, called Align Your Mind, that just came out this year. That's all about that. And so my therapist had me do some of that work where I was like actually talking to, and I felt really silly the first time I did it, 7-year-old Ellen, or the Ellen in 6th grade that I got taken to a nutritionist because I was overweight, and it kicked off just decades of disordered eating and horrible self, view, and just a lot of very challenging things for me that I wish I could tell that girl now that, screw what they say. It does not matter. You're just fine.
It's very 1990s.
It's so 1990s. It would have been like 90, 91. And then, my mom and I, because she was in the same boat, and we did all of that, like, I don't know if you ever did or heard of it, but Dr. Dean Ornish was this like low fat king. And so we were basically eating like Snackwells. I don't know if you remember those like low fat cookies, and,
The chocolate brownie ones are delicious.
Yes. And like chicken with nothing on it. And it was just sad. And there's such a better way to deal with all of that now, although it's still, I have a daughter, and that stuff is hard to eradicate.
It's interesting too, though, because I think having experienced disordered eating in my teen years as well, it becomes part of it became part of my being. It became the control element of it, which then led into, college and getting jobs, and the control element was always there, whether it was disordered eating or it was some other part of my work. Did you find that the control element as you got into adult life transitioned, or did it stay disordered eating, or both?
It stuck around, and like for me, it was the eating was my comfort. Mm-hmm. So that's really where how it manifested for me. And so I came to just like need and require food, like not good food, and a lot of it when I was sad or mad or whatever. And so it's a little bit different, I think, than the perfectionism that might come with like aggressively, very meticulously counting calories, or, depending on what kind of ED you may or may not have experienced. But for me, it was more about not emotionally processing things and eating instead. So it was sort of like what I turned to. And then, when I went to college, for some reason, like I think it was like right now it was a renaissance of myself. Like I discovered myself for the first time, lost a ton of weight, was just like super cool with like eating wasn't the thing I thought about all the time anymore, and then the more and more depressed I got, and the more and more I sort of slid into that feeling of, I don't know who I am anymore. And that renaissance is long gone. When I was in my 30s and 40s, that's when it all snuck back. And so in this last year, it's been unlearning a lot of that. And I really credit my therapist for this, but like actually learning how to connect to the feelings that I'm having, which, you know, I grew up in a time when we just like, we didn't really talk about them. Like, it's not, my parents were very cool. They're like, you know, we expressed ourselves and we said, you know, Matt, when you did that, it really hurt my feelings. And we sat down and we had very orderly conversations about it. But, you know, when we were in like a big emotion, we were supposed to go away and then like come back when we were calm. And there was something about that led me to just feel like, just not be able to really feel my feelings until they were overdone. And so, you know, that's when you're like, cry at work, and you really don't want to cry at work, but like, you can't stop it. You know, it's like this physical thing, which I've since learned is kind of my stress response too. But you know, it was so unhealthy. And that's kind of where, so that's where the eating and the sort of numbing that I was doing. And I was just really doing that, especially towards the beginning of the end of last year, which is where I had sort of one of my big moments. And
yeah, lead us up to that. I mean, tell us what happened in between. I mean, I didn't mean to take you down a disordered eating pattern, but I think it's important. I think
we should talk about it.
I agree, because I can pretty much guarantee you that the two of us were not the only ones with disordered eating patterns in the 90s, right? Like, and maybe fewer guys, but maybe not. You know, I think we all had these, I had a situation in which, you know, my father said, you need to lose weight. You're too big. You know, you've gained too much weight. And I was like 12. And since then, and I don't think he said it with any malintent, and I don't think it was anything like, I think he was literally concerned, and it was the time period. It was just how it goes. But that plants a seed in us, and we kind of navigate our world. Little do we know, in the workplace, in all the things we do, just from little things like that become bigger.
It's so
plants.
huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great example of impact versus intent, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm sure I've talked to my parents about the whole, you know, going to a nutritionist thing. And it's so funny. I can remember such specific things about, like, I remember what it felt like to be in the office. I remember the sound her pen made on the paper, and like how neat her writing was. Like, it just was so weird that there's these really physical memories that come along with that, you know, experience, which was it wasn't like anyone was yelling at me and saying, you know, you're horrible, but it was like, oh yeah, you need to do all these things differently because the way you are isn't good, right? And I wasn't even really that overweight. I was just
right. You were a teenager.
Slightly bigger, you know, and
you were 12.
I was 12. I was 11. I was 12. Yeah. And there's that, like, that indelible impact. And as a parent, it's terrifying because I'm constantly like, oh God, you know, what do I say? And watching my daughter now as a preteen, like, start to think about weight and appearance. And she's so much more confident than I am. But, you know, I find myself being like, you need to eat some protein, you know, like, you can't just have Takis for breakfast, which is probably good advice, honestly. Yeah. But, you know, it's like, I have to really watch what I'm saying to her. So anyway, the cycle it's a long and challenging one, but yeah. So I will tell you a little bit about where I got to where I was. So I am an only child, which I think plays into this a little bit. My parents were 35 and 38 when they had me. So definitely always been a little bit older. For my generation, I was 35 when I had my daughter, and I'm mostly on par with other parents. So I think it's changed a lot since then. And I grew up in Hawaii. So I was born and raised in Honolulu. My dad taught at the university there, and my mom worked, and, you know, kind of a latchkey kid. But the interesting thing about growing up as a white person in Hawaii is that you are usually or often the only person in the room who looks like you. And I think that's a good experience for anyone to have, you know, and I'm really grateful, honestly, for that experience. I mean, Hawaii is incredible, and I'm grateful to have been born and raised there, because I think it has so many different cultures coming together that you learn so much about lots of different people and ways of doing things. And the food is just, every birthday party was an incredible smorgasbord of like, Japanese food and Chinese food and Hawaiian food and Filipino food and Korean food. It was just so good. So I feel really lucky, and it was hard. I felt really lonely sometimes, especially as an only child. So I realized when I was older and was first kind of going through the values exercise of like, okay, what are my core values? That belonging is one of my core values. And when belonging is threatened, I feel that is really something that brings out, that's really hard for me, and so that translates to like the workplace. When I feel like we're not creating a workplace where people feel like they belong, or when I feel like I don't belong, it really starts to tip the scales for me to not feel good. And I say all that because I was really experiencing that in my role. Especially like during the pandemic, I think you're right. Everything shifted for a lot of us. We were able to be like, oh, this is what it's like to not commute every day. And, I had so much more time with my family. We started a garden. We went vegan for a while, which did not last long because we love cheese. But, we got a dog. Like we just had this really, the best experience you can have in a shitty situation, and not to make light of what was going on, because it was horrible. But when you're sort of thrown together, what are you going to do? And so I was just kind of reminded of how it was like to be with my family more often, because I had the kind of job where I was gone a lot for events and travel, and, was taking care of my body with this great food I was growing myself, which I'd never done before. And so I had started to unravel then. Like that was when I started, and I had just turned 40 right before the pandemic. So like the workplace that I thought I loved was starting to show its true colors to me. And I say that to say like, someone else might have been in that same workplace and be listening to this and have had a great time and, still be there even. And that's totally okay. It wasn't for me, and there were things that really started to show up for me, especially after the racial reckoning and George Floyd's murder, and, how I learned a lot really quickly about how people who did not look like me were experiencing the workplace that I just hadn't realized before. And that's where we talk about white privilege, right? Like I certainly, again, look where I grew up, like I grew up around a lot of people that didn't look like me. That wasn't something I was unfamiliar with, but I was unfamiliar with the fact that the norms in our workplace just really, really don't work for lots of people. I knew they didn't work for women in a lot of ways, but like I really, especially with learning about Black Lives Matter and everything that was going on, there were so many amazing thought leaders that I learned about and started reading during that time who taught me a ton. And I still, like, one of the things I say to everyone is like, go out and find those people to learn from who are not like you, because there's so much out there that you don't know. And it's our job to do that, I think.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And so hearing your story, it sounds like the culture or what you were experiencing or seeing maybe for the first time, or maybe you were seeing because you were looking for it this time, instead of, maybe just assuming before. And so it was more that and less like, I hate the tactics of this job or the things that I do, besides the fact that like the pandemic shows me like there is joy when I'm not
yeah, it's not all about work.
But it wasn't necessarily like the day-to-day job, or was it a mixture of all of it? I think it started
to become a little of both. Okay. But at the beginnings of this sort of like, okay, I'm 40, we're in this pandemic, I'm really getting my privileged world shaken and doing a lot of learning and unlearning, and that's really uncomfortable and hard, and everybody, we were in a really hard place. So it started with that, but then that led me to not always agree with the policies. And I was on the executive team. And so I was part of the leadership. And, when I started to voice opinions that were different or different ways of doing things, those weren't always welcomed. And that's okay. Again, everybody has a different prerogative. When I was first figuring out what I was even disagreeing with, I probably wasn't that, well-spoken about it or was emotional about it, because it was an emotional time too. So none of this is to put blame on anyone, but it started to really not work for me. And that's when I started to kind of question.
Because it triggered your sense of belonging.
The whole thing, 100%, it triggered my sense of belonging. And the only reason I knew that is because I'd been lucky enough, the same workplace paid for a coach for me who's life-changing. And that's actually why I went on to become a coach, because she helped me realize that was one of my values. And my other core value is wholeheartedness, So it's like I'm this very earnest individual who wants people to feel like they belong. And that does not work all the time in a very politically charged workplace, which I knew how to play the game. Like, I went into it knowing how to play the game, how to get the promotions to, I had multiple
Society's
jobs.
Checklist.
Yeah, oh my gosh, 100%. I checked it all off. And
did it bring happiness like they promised us?
Not at all. Did it for you?
No.
Yeah. And that's now what I'm like, oh my God, we are so broken in so many ways, because now living outside of the bubble of what is expected of me and just sort of living with what I expect of myself, it's so different, and that's ultimately where I got to at the end of this journey. But so there is hope out there. But I felt really trapped. And so this is where I think this might resonate with a lot of listeners, because this is very true for a lot of the people I coach. I was this sole income earner for my family. My husband was managing, our kid was in kindergarten and first grade during the pandemic. So needed attention, and I was in back-to-back Zoom meetings. And so I was the income earner. I was getting the benefits. My husband's a type 1 diabetic. I have medical conditions. Not having insurance is just a non-starter for us. So it felt like there was no other choice, I had to stay. And then another job opened up at a different institution locally. And it was sort of one of those, there are only 2 or 3 jobs that were at the level I was looking at in the industry I was in. And so I applied for it and got it. And I think I knew, as I was making that transition, it maybe wasn't what I wanted, but it felt like what I should be doing, because it was the next step up. It was an assistant vice president role, right? And I was in charge of the whole team. And
yeah, that was your next checkbox.
That's my next checkbox, 100%. And I had benefits, and I had the salary, and I had more salary. So it was better, and,
right.
And then it just kept unraveling for me while I was there. I just kept being like, wait, why are we doing that way? Or, this feels not good. And I have to credit my team that I had there were amazing. And a lot of them were younger millennials. And I say that not to say that everybody acts the same in different age groups, but they questioned so much. And I really, really needed that. It made me actually say, well, you know what? I don't know why we do it that way. Let me find out. And then, sometimes I have to come back and be like, no one knows why we do it that way. We're just supposed to do it that way. And, so it was really uncovering a lot of my own biases and my own learned experience, and undoing that. We have to do it the way we always have been told. We have to do this life checklist. We have to do it in this order. And I really learned to let go of a lot of that because of that experience. So I'm grateful for it. But I was just miserable because I didn't feel connected or aligned with the leadership writ large. And I felt very alone. So that belonging was really showing up for me because I didn't I felt stuck and alone, and I had started taking coaching, going to coaching training. And so I knew that was probably going to be my long-term goal, but, it didn't seem like it was possible anytime soon because, salary and benefits are cool.
Or safe, right?
So, right. And it was not safe at all. It was a big risk. And so I thought I had to stay there. And it got worse and worse for me for a lot of reasons. And the moment that the life shift happened was I'd had just a run of bad months, just bad conversations, resources getting cut, just not being able to do my job, not getting any purchase. I felt like there were things I was saying that people weren't listening to. And, again, my experience, not everybody's in that workplace, but mine was not good for a lot of reasons. And I was finding myself crying on my way into work and crying on my way home and not really knowing why I was crying necessarily, just that I was really upset, and that goes back to the feeling your feelings thing and how that's, sort of hard. But I was attending a performance of the musical Beetlejuice, which is a great music. I'm a huge musical theater nerd.
Yeah.
So have you seen it?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Love it. Right. Not a sad musical, not sad, which is important for the story. But I had met my husband and daughter for dinner and I had come straight from work to meet them there. So that always felt like a little sad because I didn't get to go with them or whatever. And we had dinner and then we went and we sat down in the theater. And as soon as the lights went out, I started just kind of it was that dark and that peace. And maybe it's because I was an actor and I had lots and lots of time in theaters growing up and in my early 20s that it's a safe place for me. I think that might have been what happened, but I just started crying and I could not stop. And it was so bizarre because I was like, what is happening? It was like I was possessed because the musical, again, not a sad musical. There was no reason for me to be crying, while they're, dancing and talking about death in a funny way. And I have never had that happen before where I couldn't stop. It was just coming and to a sobbing place where I was I was very trying to keep it in. So my daughter didn't notice and she was on the other side of my husband. So she didn't, but my husband was like, what the hell is wrong with you? He's worried about me. And it was I broke. It was the point where I broke and
legit your watershed moment,
100%, 100%.
Broke. Yeah. Well, there's only so much we can hold in.
It's so true. And that's where I get now because it's we are conditioned to hold a lot in and not talk about this stuff and think that we're bad for feeling it. Yeah. I think at work, which we can get into later, but yeah.
I think you're conditioned also, or we are conditioned, we're a similar age group. We were conditioned that we need to be grateful for these jobs as well. That not everyone gets the chance to be vice president or assistant vice president or, whatever it may be. And so therefore we can't dislike it. We can't complain about it because how lucky are we? Not to mention the fact that we worked our butt off to get there because that's what people told us to do. But at the same time, it's I should be grateful for this. So that adds to me, it adds another layer of feelings, right? Because now you're why am I not grateful? Am I broken? And then you have that plus your trigger of just not feeling that belonging sense of people not kind of a space that doesn't feel right to you because they're not choosing the things that maybe would feel more aligned or whatever that may be. Would you say that those built up experiences was more like a soul suck, or is it more of a burnout of I'm just dead to the world when work is over kind of thing? Or is it more I'm going in and I feel like I just have to shed all of me just to survive? And are they different? I don't know.
I think they can be, and they can be the same, and they can be part of a whole journey. I would say I felt that soul sucky thing more at the, I was feeling that, and then it turned into the burnout where I was and I live in the Seattle area, and it's really dark and cold for a lot of the months. Like right now, it's almost dark and it's like 3:51. But it was this, I had never felt like this before, where I was, crying on the way in, crying on the way out, just trying to make it through the day, trying to initiate as little as possible. Like by the end of my time there, I was just like, how can I stay under the radar? Which is so anathema to what I learned and what I've always thought I had to do, which is be out in front and do all the good things and be seen. And, so it was like, I just gave up, near
It's
the
like
end.
a shell of yourself.
Yes. And everything was hard, like I came home and I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to be with my family, and I just wanted to read or watch TV and escape. And that numbing, and that's where the eating was coming in too. It's that like, I just wanted to numb. And I disengaged from, a lot of my things that I did that I loved. And, I left it all at work. If I had anything to give, I did it when I was working with customers, essentially at work, where I had to be forward facing, and I gave it all to them, and then it was gone,
Yeah. But then you went to a love of yours, a love of your life, this theater moment, in which should be a beautiful escape. But I love that you kind of correlated that space for something that felt safe. It probably held a lot of, maybe not that specific theater, but a theater holds a lot of fond memories of things that you had done and the people and all those things. And maybe it was like this little hug of like, okay, your body just needed to like let it out. And sometimes we can't predict when that's going to happen. We definitely can't force it, and so it's beautiful that you had it. I mean, in a funny musical, it just makes it that much more important, I think. If it had been had you gone to see the Notebook musical and you were crying then, maybe it wouldn't have been as impactful, right? Because you might have associated, well, it's a really sad moment or those things. So this stands out even more because it was the antithesis of what you should be doing in that moment. And so you have this, eventually, I'm assuming you recover from the sobbing in the show, and hopefully you got to enjoy some of it. But what happens next? Like, what does that give you? Like, oh, I really need to do something? Or was it?
I knew. I was like, okay, that means that is a shift. Like, that is a shift. Something has shifted. And there was this weird, funny journey I went on afterwards, where I got asked to apply for this job in London, and it was like right after or during, I can't remember, it was like right around the same time as this breakdown in Beetlejuice. And I was like, London's really cool. Like, maybe I should pursue it. And, we weren't really thrilled with the way the political realm was going here, and, kind of nervous about it. And so, okay, why not? It could be fun to try it. So I ultimately got to a place where they flew me over for an interview. And my husband came with me, and we went a little early, and we just like kind of, because we'd never been there. So we like went to the neighborhoods that we would like possibly live in, and just like, we just wanted to feel it out. Like, what would it be like to live there? And I mean, we were obsessed. Like, it's amazing. And obviously it has its problems too, but like, I have been obsessed with England forever. My grandfather's from there, so I must have it in my blood, but like, yeah, obsessed. So we were doing all this, and we were like, well, this could be, and we were having this big like existential, like, and it was funny, as I was going through the interview process in London, I was like, God, I don't really want to do this. Like, I really could feel, because it was the same role I had here, but just in London. And I know I did well in the interview, but I'm pretty sure I didn't give, like, I definitely was not like, I'm so excited, So I didn't get invited, I didn't get the job. And that's when my husband and we were there, and we went out to dinner. It was our last night there. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I cannot do this job anymore. Like, I'm glad we did that. And we had a lot of time during that week because it was just the two of us and we never go on vacations. So it was sort of this weird vacation that we took. And we had a lot of time to talk, just the two of us, about the future and like what was happening. And so we really got that space to be together and, you know, think about big life decisions. And so that's when I decided, and I came back from that trip and went in and met with my boss and was like, hey, he knew I was, you know, going out for the job. And I was like, hey, it was a great trip. Really enjoyed it. Didn't get the job. Also, I'm done. Like, I'm no longer going to work here, in a nice way. And I stayed for like 2 months. You know, I closed it out and I did all the things, but it was that moment in Beetlejuice where I just like, it's so interesting to talk to you about it now, because I do think there was a safety and a warmth and an ability to feel that I felt, because theater's always been that safe space for me. So that's so interesting, because I hadn't really thought about that. But I think it just allowed me to say, okay, this is the sign that I'm done. I have this other weird sign that I might need to go to London. So I'm going to just go pursue that really quickly. And then it wasn't for me, and great. So then I really
like your confirmation. It was your way.
I was settled.
Well, also, like, I think there's something to be said about, I'm going to give it one last try, and things didn't align. And so it's the reminder of, okay, I was right. Like this, this is not. It was
like a test.
Right. It was a test, and you did your part. You did your very grow up, you know, born in the late 70s, early 80s. I was trying to do math real quick. And
Gen X.
You were,
End of Gen X part. Yeah.
You were doing the part of like, okay, this was offered to me. I have to do it. But you knew. And it was just this beautiful universe saying, this isn't your direction. But it's scary. Like, I love that you had this time and this space and quiet probably to talk with your husband about like true, like, we need to figure this out. But also, you're the breadwinner. How are you able, and this is not a financial question, but how are you able to make that decision that like, okay, I'm going to do my own thing and we're going to be okay? Because you also have a child who is in less than
12.
10, right?
Yeah. I want to answer that, but I want to tell you this, just the absolutely bananas thing that happened to get me to London. And it's very quick, but when I was interviewing for the job, I was like, oh, I don't know if I should do this or not. I don't know. And my husband was renovating. We have like a little cottage on our property, and he was renovating it. And he had moved the fridge out of the kitchen and had ripped up this like ancient linoleum that had been there for years. And he found this. I don't know if you can see it. It's a magnet that says London on it, under the linoleum, under the fridge that had been there for decades. And he came in and was like, I found this. And I'm getting goosebumps. It was like, well, I guess we have to go. Like, there was no question then, right? Like, it was like, clearly we have to go. And I think the reason for that was because we had to have those conversations with each other and that time with each other. But it was so weird. That was another big shift moment, right? But the oddest thing, right? So this jumping off was really risky, and, you know, it's not lucrative yet, you know, and I'll say that honestly, because I think we have to be honest with that. I was lucky to get some support from my parents. We had some savings. We have some support from his mom, and she's now living with us. So we've been able to kind of, in the cottage where the London magnet was. So we've been able to kind of combine expenses a little bit. And, you know, I was way off in what I projected for what I would be making versus what I am actually making. And I hadn't really thought about the costs that had to go into the business, because I'm sitting here thinking, oh, there aren't any expenses. I mean, I'm just here in a room. There are so many expenses,
right?
Especially things like trainings. And like, I'm learning, you know, like I got certified in how to do the DISC assessment, because that's a skill that's really useful when you're coaching. And I'm doing, like, I have a keynote coach right now who's helping me with a keynote speech. So all of these things that I know will pay out in the long run, but they cost money now. So it was
faith?
Not
was
safe.
It belief?
Yeah, I think so. I think think it was a combination, and I know there are other people out there who have gotten here, of I literally cannot do this anymore. And I see it, that is a place of privilege that I could actually leave. So I do acknowledge that.
But you couldn't see any other future.
I couldn't, especially because I had that moment, in Beetlejuice, I was like, I never.
The irony like there is the whole
exorcism.
Yeah. Well, the irony there is the whole like being dead thing. And like, and I think
which is a song from the musical, folks.
Right. But I think there's some kind of like, you could have stayed on that path. Like technically you could have stayed on that path and lost yourself in the process, like even more so than you were. And so many people do that because we think we're supposed to, or we just don't have the epiphany of something that is driving us to do something differently, something that feels more aligned, which it feels like, despite it's only been a year, which is a long time, but also like not a long time. It feels very aligned for you despite not maybe making the money that you expected yet.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, I'm not making my salary yet, but I was making a 6-figure salary. Like, I can't get there yet. No regrets.
Do regrets
not
come
one.
with it?
Not one. And that's where I think there may be something wrong with me, or maybe it's just what hope looks like. But I've never been happier. And even though I'm like staring down a dwindling bank account, and the thing that with our current president being elected, a lot of the places where I would have gotten pretty easy, low-hanging fruit business from lost a ton of funding. The public sector, nonprofits, all of the NSF, NIH grants, all of that. That was kind of my area of like the easiest connections. So many of those places stopped even having funding to spend on a consultant or a coach. So a lot of the stuff that I thought would be easier just changed overnight. And every coach I talk to is like, this has been one of the harder years because, people they're out of jobs, they're losing money, they're laying people off. Like, it's just not a time of great, expansion,
well,
except
maybe
for
knowledge
the
expansion.
Richest.
Well, yes. But I think that maybe an opportunity
right.
for you to take the time to get all the pieces together, right? And to create. I don't know, like, I don't want to take this away from you, but you said, maybe it's the hope. And I think it's more, not knowing you very well, but it feels like when someone clicks in with something that feels very heart-centered, purpose-driven, it's more about the alignment and you feeling like you're no longer putting like a square peg in a round hole, like you're actually the right piece for the puzzle. And all the other things in a previous version, or if you were doing the wrong thing, you'd be like, dwindling bank account, holy crap, and you'd be panicking.
Yep.
But because this feels so right, dare I say, maybe that's what keeps it going. That's what fuels the fire. That's what, like, it must feel like, you're doing the right thing.
That's exactly right. Like, yeah, it's this alignment that I've never felt in my life. And it's taken this whole year to heal from where I was. And it's been a really interesting journey in that respect. Like, there were the first few months, I was still kind of hibernating because I was like so tired all the time. And I would go and sit by the water because I live up by the water and just like cry, and I sound like I cry a lot. I don't actually. It just kind of happened to be in this.
If you did, that's okay.
And it is okay, totally. But I think the reason I say that is because it was unexpected for me, and it was this letting go. And I cry more now because I think it's easier for me to like express the emotion that way.
I mean, you had society's identity that was kind of placed on you that you happily, maybe not happily, absorbed, right, growing up because of your generation. And now you're finding your true identity. So I think there is a shedding of the elements that come with that. Like, there has to be I don't know if there has to be, but I feel like there is a sadness sometimes when I look back on the things that I chose to do professionally. like, why did I do that? Oh, do I miss a piece of that? Do I, like, so there are probably pieces of the life that you lived for 15 plus years or whatever you said, that you miss. But is that true? Are there pieces
100%.
of that life that you miss besides the salary, paying your bills?
Benefits? Yes.
And
I'm trying to think of exactly what it is. Part of it is I feel some sadness that I stayed there for so long, not there being the workplace, but there being in that space. I'm sad that I'm 46 and just starting to figure out who I am and reclaim who I am, to use a word my friend Kat uses all the time. But there's not a lot I miss about the actual work. And I think I regret, which is a hard word. I wish I could have figured it out sooner. And just like we were talking about earlier, I couldn't have. I had to live it I was not there. And so I would say if there are people in that situation who feel, maybe at midlife, maybe at mid-career or not, but just feel really, really stuck in a place where they no longer feel like they belong, it absolutely gets better. And it gets better because you start to reclaim yourself, believe in yourself one little bit at a time. It takes, I know I talk about the shift and you talk about the shift, but to get to that shift moment, there were lots of little shifts along the way,
for sure.
So,
perspective
so I think,
change, perspective change, or, all the things that you're doing now, you were probably doing little pieces of in previous versions of yourself. And now you're able to kind of piece them all together and in a beautiful way to help other people kind of pull themselves out of moments that in which we feel stuck, because we're never really stuck. I mean, unless we're in a dire situation in which there's nothing we can do about it at the time. But I think you're right. I think you can't regret too much because it's already done. How many stories do we hear about people that actually start brand new careers like yourself in their 40s, in their 50s, and have a long, successful new version of their career? So I think, you're 46, but you're 46. Like, you're not 100. So no, there's a lot of opportunity for you there. And I think that a lot of people can relate to your story because so many of us bought into what we were supposed to do. Yeah. So I'm curious, and I don't know who I want you to ask or say something to, but I'm wondering if you could go back. You could go back to the Ellen who was crying all the way to work. And if there's anything that this version of you that's still becoming, that's, out of the cocoon, but, getting a little bit of the butterfly in you, is there anything you'd want to say to her?
I mean, I want to say, it gets better, but that feels sort of trite, but it does. And you're not wrong, I think, because I spent a lot of time trying to fix myself to fit into this place that was just not made for me. Mm-hmm. And I do think that, if you look at most of the books or talks or podcasts or whatever about burnout, they're often about what can you do differently when it's actually a system that's really, really broken that's causing the burnout. So I think I would like to have said, it's not you. Mm-hmm. It's not your fault. Okay. Yeah. And it's going to be okay. And it's okay to be here and you're going to be okay.
Yeah. And you're going to figure this out and you're going to be happy and you're going to be aligned and all the beautiful things that you probably wouldn't have believed you at the time because
I wouldn't have
felt so dire. But, it's very common. All the time I ask this question and most of the responses are, it's going to be okay. Because in the moment, we don't realize how powerful we are, how resilient we can be, how things can change on a dime. And we just need to know that we're going to be held and that we're seen. So thank you for doing that little experiment with me and sharing your story in this way and just being a part of the Life Shift podcast. It's just a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. That was an important thing for me to do. I think I didn't realize that, but thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Well, thank you for sharing with everyone listening. And I think that what your story is, although unique to you, not unique to the planet. I think there are a lot of people that have been in the same experience or feeling the same way.
Yeah. Right now in particular, I do.
Exactly. And if someone's out there listening and they feel like connected to a part of your story or something resonated with them and their story and they want to tell you about it or connect with you or find you, what's the best way to find Ellen, get in your circle, bug you, tell you their story?
Oh my gosh. I respond to all of it. So if you want to email me, it's pretty easy. It's ellen@ewbcoaching.com. I look at all my email, I answer it. You can also find me on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm the most active at the moment. LinkedIn is having some issues, so we'll see how long I stay on there. But yeah, on LinkedIn, I have a Substack, I have an Instagram. Reach out in any of those places. And I really, really enjoy talking to people and hearing about their experiences. And that helps me do what I do better because I can keep, hearing, sorry, my dog's barking in the background. I don't know if you can hear it, but he's excited too. It just helps me be more tuned in to all the different versions of people that are out there and all of the different experiences that they're having that are not all like mine. Mine is mine to have by myself,
Right.
So I think it's just such a gift when I get to talk to people. So yes, please reach out.
Highly encourage everyone listening. If something that Ellen said resonated with you, or you just want to share a part of your story because there's power in telling your story as well, please reach out. I'll put all the links in the show notes just so it's easier and they can pick their poison of which way they want to go. And thanks again.
And podcasts too. I should say the Hard at Work podcast. You can find it anywhere you find pods, but you can find Matt's episode on it too.
Yes.
And it's a nice place to have lots of conversations about how we can change the future of work with some really, really smart people. So it's inspiring, I think. Yeah. I hope anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll definitely link that as well and check out my episode on her podcast. By the time this comes out, it will probably be out. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you for being a part of the Life Shift podcast. We were talking about journaling earlier. I do have the Life Shift journal. If you're looking for something that's kind of aligned with this, check it out on the lifeshiftpodcast.com. And with that, I'm going to say adios. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks again, Ellen.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Life Shift podcast. If you want to learn more, go to www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. There you can check out all the different episodes. You can check out some of the reviews for the podcast and the Life Shift journal. Links are there so you can purchase your own copy, whether in digital or print format. Thanks again.